As some of you may know, as others may not, I typically like to give you guys a stereotype video based on your equipment anytime a game with a lot of variations in play gets released. Not this time, or at least not right now, probably later. I wanted to take a moment today to alleviate the confusion about different weapons for all of the newcomers. What I don't want to do, and I'm going to try to make careful note of this, is restrict them into feeling that there are right and wrong choices here. It's your game, it's your weapon, it's your choice. I'm only here to help you make an educated decision. We are going to be ranking all of the weapons on 3 categories. 1 to 10 difficulty rating, 1 to 10 cool factor, and a final 1 to 10 practicality rating. What are my qualifications? Well, let's just say every night I cry and rate firearms based on their mouthfeel, so trust me, I am a professional when it comes to this stuff. By the way, I will definitely forget to timecode the video when I'm editing. My bad, each segment is going to be about a minute long, and the weapon icon is in the corner if you want to scrub through. Starting us off today, we have the cover model for the Monster Hunter franchise, the Greatsword. For a difficulty rating, she's getting a 3 out of 10. It is the default weapon, so some people would expect a 1 in this category, but it does still involve developing a certain degree of timing. However, it also has a block that you can hold for the better half of a century, so it's not entirely that risky. For a cool rating, it's a 9 out of 10. There are definitely flashier options that will have all eyes on you. In terms of pure impressive shit that you can do, this actually isn't at the top. It's not got a lot of flair. However, this weapon is iconic to Monster Hunter, so it needs to get a massive amount of credit for that alone. Practicality rating, 8 out of 10. It does everything well apart from flying targets, of which there are not many, and they always have to touch the ground sometime. This massive slab is used to seeing a monster's bet and raising. Greatswords are about as close to even as you're going to get in terms of squaring up against a monster and matching it in pure brutality. If you want a weapon to brawl with, this is your best option. Up next, the Longsword. Difficulty rating is going to land around a 4 out of 10 here. It's not a hard weapon to understand, but maximizing its usefulness can be complicated in the early stages given all of the dodging you'll be doing. For cool rating, we are going all the way up to 10 out of 10. Amongst all the flashy weapons, this one turns you into one of those special mysterious Power Rangers that weren't part of the original group. It just makes you feel so effortlessly cool. Practicality rating is going to be very high as well on account of its incredible movement, damage, and severing potential. 10 out of 10. I don't think there's a better weapon to represent fluidity in combat, and the beta really taught us this. It nearly turns the area into a dance floor. Apart from the bow, there might not be a better weapon in general, and most of the high players seem to agree. If you would like a choice that is going to pay you back for the effort you put in, look no further. This weapon exists to make you feel like an anime protagonist, or a clutch guest character more accurately, because you'd be too powerful on the main cast. We are now brought to the Sword and Shield. The difficulty rating for the Sword and Shield lands at a meager 1 out of 10. I do not think there's a more straightforward weapon to drop into a newcomer's hand. If you knew absolutely nothing about Monster Hunter and asked, hey, what should I use? I would recommend this. For a cool rating, it's a 6 out of 10. It's not bad, none of these weapons lack cool factor, but at the end of the day, it's a scaled down version of more badass looking options. Practicality surprisingly lands at an 8 out of 10. You're not delivering the wrath of God in terms of damage, but you're not going to die constantly either. You have access to both blocking and agile dodging, and that's a massive assist for new players. More importantly than that, consider the Sword and Shield like a gateway drug. You discover what kinds of playstyle you want to utilize most, and then you can invest in weapons of that style, or you can completely forego committing and keep the Sword and Shield. This weapon represents the peak freedom of choice. Dual blades are up on deck, and these weapons are significantly less difficult than they initially appear. 3 out of 10. The only thing you really pay attention to is burning your stamina into nothingness and dodging frequently. There's a bit more to it, but not really. Dual Blade's cool factor blows them out of the water with a 10 out of 10. There's no other place to settle a knife tornado on this scale. I mean, seriously, it's a fucking knife tornado. Where else are you gonna put it? Practicality is not so similar. It's a 6 out of 10. Fantastic as the rabid little shit is, the range is not. There's a whole lot of distance closing involved on anything that isn't mobility averse. In addition, you need to be real close to your targets, even for a melee weapon. This can become very dangerous for newer players who aren't so good at predicting attacks. It's very similar to the style that I mentioned with longswords minus the pause combos. You don't have defense, so you need to rely on dodging. It's like a dance, but with prison shivs. I believe should you figure out the hyper-aggressive style utilized by these blades, you will have an incredible amount of fun, but beware as it is a bit more dangerous. We have arrived at the hammer, and if you start out with the hammer, you will likely get hurt. I'm sorry, it's a 9 out of 10 on the difficulty scale for a newcomer. You need picture-perfect timing and a willingness to point-blank monsters' teeth in order for this to work. Anything else, and your torso and shins will be ruined. Cool factor is clocking a solid 6 out of 10. As much as it is just a hammer, it's still breaking even because, well, it's a hammer. If someone is successfully using this in your game, there is cause to be impressed. Hammer mains deserve their flowers because they've gotten so many attack frames memorized, and they've been punished the entire time. Practicality is also scoring lower with a 6 out of 10. Honestly, it's higher than I would originally put for one reason. Hammer players. This is a weapon that requires patience and attentiveness for success. It's weird saying it, but good hammer players are some of the smartest people you will come across. They can usually play your own weapon on par with or better than you can. Hunting horn is getting a touch of the spotlight, and this is going to be weird. I don't have horn footage, so go watch this guy who had one next to me. I'm considering that good enough because I really didn't want to use it on solo. Difficulty is a 3 out of 10. The only difficult part of the hunting horn is that you're best off relying upon others. For most of you, that's already a disqualification. Cool factor, and I'm sorry to say band kids, but it's a 3 out of 10. You're not selling me on the idea of a weaponized bagpipe. That instrument was always just a ballsack horn anyway. Practicality gets split into 2 sections here. 4 out of 10 if you're alone, possibly lower, but with a team, you're getting bumped all the way to an 8 out of 10, possibly higher. You're not going to be carrying the match with this, however, you very well might save several lives and cut 10 to 15 minutes off the end time, so although you're not carrying, you sure are pushing the wagon pretty heavily. The horn is a generous choice to make for everyone but yourself at the end of the day. The lance is about as safe as you can possibly hope to be with a melee weapon. You practically turn yourself into a fortress, so I'm giving the difficulty a 2 out of 10. Not only are you constantly blocking, you also operate pretty damn far from your opponent, so any mistakes you make are almost entirely mitigated. Cool factor is going to be landing a solid 6. You have some cool weapon skins, sure, but you also look like a fucking dork when you fight, and you're always going to be compared to the Gunlance. If you want to be the pinnacle of defensive gameplay though, that's right here. Practicality is an 8 out of 10, easily. It's a tale as old as time. A human being standing behind something using a sharp stick to poke shit that can't reach them. I promise you, if we walk it back far enough, there's something in your genetics that says you should at least be adept at this. If you can't do the lance, it's probably not your first time disappointing your ancestors. The Gunlance is a very similar concept to the last, it's just a whole lot cooler. Difficulty is getting bumped up to about a 4 out of 10. It plays very similarly to the lance, but you need to plan your swings a little more tactfully, not to mention the new bullet mechanics that you're juggling. Cool factor is a 9 out of 10. You've got all the chest bumping involved in normal lance gameplay, and now it has explosions. What's not to like? Practicality is a 7 out of 10. I know it's weird that I see this as a less practical version of the basic lance, but it kind of is. You are more than likely playing this for the sake of aura farming, so less practical but generally more flashy and interactive. At the end of the day, normal lance still remains at the peak of the mountain for defensive weapons, and the Gunlance is a defensive weapon meant to put on a show and impress your teammates. This is one of my personal favorite weapons that I need to practice more with, the switch axe. Difficulty is landing at an even 6 out of 10. It's not the easiest thing to pick up and go to work with, but it's not rocket science either. Learn the combos that transform the weapon, you'll be fine. Cool factor is clocking a 9 out of 10. Not only are you holding a transformer, Switch Axe gets most of the best skins in the game. Oh, and it's got a warhead that lies dormant within the sword for some reason. Practicality is going to get an 8 out of 10. You've got speed, reach, and strength all packed into one weapon. Once you get over the initial learning curve, you're gonna feel just as badass as you look. I believe this is the ideal choice for someone who wants that punchy feel that a greatsword will give them, but they also want to play much more aggressively and have a weapon that's a little more in-depth. The charge blade is... Look, I know I said I wouldn't suggest against anything, but this is probably what I would suggest against as a beginner. If you don't watch a YouTube tutorial to figure it out, there's a 98% chance that you never will organically. I have watched the process unfold numerous times. It's a 10 out of 10 difficulty because the result is always the same. Cool factor is also an easy 10 out of 10. It's a sword, shield, axe, and chainsaw all built into one. This thing is a high-functioning identity crisis. It's basically Moon Knight as a weapon. Practicality is getting a 10 out of 10 as well. That's right, it's the only weapon here with full 10s across the board. If you can utilize the charge blade to its peak potential, it's the most cinematic weapon in the game, but most people don't use it because of how hard it is to achieve that potential. It's also up there as the most effective, or at least the most versatile, but being the most mechanically intensive, as I suggested before, you should probably stay away from this as a beginner. I really wish I didn't fucking suck with it, but alas, I do. We have now moved to my favorite weapon in the game, the insect glaive. There is an 8 out of 10 for difficulty for the same reasons as the last. The majority of people won't utilize this weapon well without very specific instructions. However, it is incredibly easy to evade with, so it's slightly less punishing. Cool factor is another 10 out of 10. This weapon happened because someone said, let's make an Apache attack helicopter a close quarters combatant, and that's a really badass idea. All you're missing is the shark face paint. Practicality is getting a 9 out of 10. Your ability to close distance, evade anything, freely mount, work against any target, and constantly create wounds make you a goddamn juggernaut of usefulness. These next three are ranged weapons. My bad in advance, I play on mouse and keyboard, so aiming is easy, but all of the other button inputs become unbelievably fucked when I use them. The light bowgun is pretty much your standard small arms utensil. All of the ammo is labeled, you just need to figure out what they do. 3 out of 10 for difficulty. Cool factor is a 6 out of 10. Yes, it's a gun and it's awesome for that, but it's also boring as hell when you look at all the crazy shit that other people are doing. Practicality, 8 out of 10. You move quickly, you're always at range, there's bullets that can do everything short of revive Uncle Ben. It's a simple choice that makes sense. Bit bland, sure, but it still makes perfect sense as a good tool. The heavy bowgun is odd, and it's a 6 out of 10 for difficulty. You would think the bowguns would be near each other comparatively, but no. This is like an Uzi versus a howitzer. You threw all of your mobility out the window when making this choice. Cool factor, well, bigger is better when it comes to firearms, so we'll give it a 7 out of 10. It is painfully slow moving, but it also gives everyone around you, including the enemy, shell shock and a military discount, so it's not too bad. Practicality-wise, it ain't great to be honest. It's a 6 out of 10 for most people. It might as well come with several anchors attached, and they would do that because the gun takes your feet off the ground when you fire it. It's big, it's slow, but so is artillery, and that shit hurts when it hits you too. The bow is our final weapon today, and stamina management can be annoying, but hitting easy dodges turns you into Mephistopheles himself, constantly regenerating it. I'd give it a 5 out of 10 for difficulty, based on the dodges alone. Cool factor is surprisingly an 8 out of 10. This is how you do a ranged weapon in a melee combat-centric game. Big bonuses for dodging, leaping shots, flashy explosions, shotgun arrows. They did it right. Practicality, that's a 10 out of 10. It's hailed as one of the best weapons in the game for a good reason. You've got the least risk and most fun that you can have at one given time. Good damage, multiple elements at your disposal, safe operating range, and easy evasion if you're pressed make for a killer weapon. I always suggest bow for anyone who wants to begin on ranged. Now, I would have loved to sit down and give you an in-depth explanation on all of the mechanics for all of the weapons, but that would make this video a half-hour long. I'm only here to get you started on a good path. This video has quite the runtime already, so I'm just going to leave you with this. Never be afraid to try new things, otherwise you'll never expand your horizons. Sometimes it'll suck initially, but sucking at something is the first step to being sorta good at something. Dedicate yourself and you will improve. That's all for me this time around. Join the Discord in the description if you want to meet some teammates or if you just want more direction on how to use these weapons well. Otherwise, have a good one.